For 10 years, a war went absolutely nowhere. Then, in one single night, everything changed. A city vanished in fire and blood, but for one man, the nightmare was only starting. Getting home would take him 10 more years. This story begins with Homer, an ancient Greek poet. Around the 8th century BC, he composed two epic poems. One was called the Iliad, about the Trojan War. The other was the Odyssey, about the journey home. Both describe events set centuries earlier, in the Bronze Age. For generations, these poems were passed down by memory alone. Storytellers recited them aloud, long before they were ever written down. For a long time, many assumed Troy was pure fiction, a beautiful story, but nothing more than imagination. Then, in the 19th century, archaeologists found something remarkable. At a site called Hisarlik in modern Turkey, they dug. Beneath the soil lay the ruins of an ancient city. It had been destroyed by fire, layer after layer, over centuries. One layer in particular showed signs of sudden, violent destruction. Many historians now believe this really was ancient Troy. The myth, it turns out, may be rooted in real history. Not every detail, certainly, but the war itself may be real. According to legend, the war began over a woman. Helen, wife of a Greek king, was taken to Troy. Whether by choice or by force remains debated even today. Furious, the Greek kingdoms united under one massive army. Kings from across Greece gathered their ships and soldiers. They sailed across the sea and laid siege to Troy. What followed was not a quick war at all. It dragged on for 10 brutal, grinding years. Neither side could fully break the other's defenses. Troy's walls held, thick and well-built for generations. The Greek camp outgrew restless and exhausted. Supplies ran low. Tempers between allied kings frayed badly. Heroes fell on both sides during endless clashes. Achilles, the greatest Greek warrior, died before the war ended. Struck, according to legend, in his one vulnerable heel. So did Hector, Troy's finest defender and its last hope. His death left the city dangerously without its best commander. By the 10th year, both sides were desperate for an end. That's when one Greek soldier had an idea. His name was Odysseus, king of the island Ithaca. He wasn't the strongest fighter in the Greek camp, but he was by far its cleverest mind. His plan didn't rely on strength at all. It relied entirely on deception. The Greeks built an enormous wooden horse, hollow inside. Craftsmen worked in secret to design it perfectly. Inside its frame, a group of soldiers hid, silent and armed. They waited in darkness, barely daring to breathe. The rest of the Greek army boarded their ships. They sailed away, appearing to give up the siege entirely. In truth, they only moved just out of sight. They left the horse behind on the beach, alone. A note or a story framed it as a gift. It was meant, supposedly, as an offering to the gods. The Trojans, exhausted from 10 years of war, celebrated wildly. They believed finally that their long ordeal was over. Some warned against bringing the horse inside the walls. One priest reportedly begged them not to trust it. Their warnings were ignored, drowned out by relief and celebration. The massive horse was dragged through Troy's own gates. Part of the city wall was even torn down to fit it. That night, the city fell into deep, celebratory sleep. Then, in total darkness, the trap sprang open. Soldiers climbed down from inside the wooden horse. They crept to the gates and threw them open. Outside, the Greek fleet had not truly sailed away. It had waited, hidden, just out of sight. The full Greek army stormed back into the city. What followed was chaos, fire, and total slaughter. A city that held for an entire decade fell in hours. Troy burned that night. Its walls finally breached from within. Its people were killed or taken as captives. Homes, temples, and palaces collapsed into ash and ruin. The greatest siege of the ancient world was suddenly over. For the Greeks, it should have felt like triumph. For Odysseus, the real story was only just beginning. He expected the journey home to take a few weeks. Ithaca wasn't far, as sea voyages went back then. Instead, it would take him 10 grueling years. Almost everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And much of it, according to the myth, was his own doing. His first major stop was an island of giants. There, Odysseus and his men found a massive cave. It was filled with cheese, milk, and penned livestock. Inside lived a Cyclops, a one-eyed giant named Polyphemus. The giant trapped them inside, sealing the cave with a boulder. It was far too heavy for ordinary men to move. Each day he ate more of Odysseus's men alive. Desperate, Odysseus devised another clever trick to survive. He offered the giant strong wine, again and again. Once Polyphemus was drunk, and half asleep they moved. He got the giant drunk, then blinded his single eye. The blinded giant screamed, but could no longer see them. As they escaped, clinging beneath his own sheep, he made one arrogant mistake. He shouted his real name back at the wounded giant. That single boast changed everything for Odysseus. Polyphemus, it turned out, was the son of Poseidon. The giant prayed aloud, begging his father for vengeance. Poseidon, god of the sea, heard his son's plea for vengeance. From that moment, the sea god cursed Odysseus personally. Every storm, every wrong current became a weapon against him. A journey of weeks became a punishment stretching years. Next came the witch Circe on her hidden island. Her home stood deep in a forest, surrounded by tame wolves. She welcomed Odysseus's men with food, wine, and false comfort. Then, with a single spell, she turned them into pigs. Only Odysseus, protected by a herb from the god Hermes, resisted. He confronted Circe and forced her to reverse the curse. Impressed by his resistance, she let his men return to human form. Eventually, she became an ally instead of an enemy. Odysseus and his crew stayed with her for nearly a year. She warned him of horrors still waiting ahead on his journey. Among them, she said, was a trip to the underworld itself. One of those horrors was the Sirens, deadly and beautiful. Their song lured sailors toward rocks and certain death. No one who heard their voices was ever said to survive. Odysseus wanted to hear the song without dying. He ordered his men to plug their ears with wax. He had himself tied tightly to the ship's own mast. As they passed, the song nearly drove him to madness. He begged and screamed at his men to release him. His men, deaf to it, kept rowing and saved his life. The dangers only multiplied from there. Odysseus and his men faced Scylla and Charybdis. These two monsters guarded a narrow, deadly strait. Scylla was a monster with many snapping, deadly heads. She lived in a cliffside cave, striking without warning. Charybdis was a massive whirlpool capable of swallowing entire ships whole. Sailing between them meant choosing which danger to risk instead. There was no path through that avoided both entirely. Odysseus lost several men to Scylla into passage. Each head snatched one sailor as the ship passed close. It was a brutal, impossible choice with no clean outcome. Storm after storm, disaster after disaster, followed relentlessly. Odysseus's men made costly, sometimes reckless mistakes of their own. On one island, sacred cattle belonged to the sun god Helios. Odysseus warned his men never to touch those animals. Trapped by storms and desperate for food, they ignored him. Starving, his men killed and ate them despite clear warnings. Furious, the gods destroyed their ship in a violent storm. Every single one of Odysseus's men died in that wreck. He alone survived, clinging to wreckage in the open sea. For days he drifted, with no land in sight. Eventually, he washed ashore on the island of a goddess. Her name was Calypso, and she kept him there for years. Some accounts say as many as 7 years passed there. She offered him immortality if he would simply stay. Odysseus refused, longing instead for his home and family. Every day he was said to sit on the shore, weeping. Eventually, the gods intervened and forced Calypso to release him. His journey toward Ithaca began again. After years of delay, more trials followed before he finally reached his homeland. A shipwreck left him stranded, alone, on yet another shore. His raft had been destroyed by yet another furious storm. He was found by a princess named Nausicaa, who helped him. She had gone to the beach that day to wash clothes. Instead, she found a desperate, shipwrecked stranger and took pity. Her people, the Phaeacians, welcomed him and heard his story. Amazed by his tale, they gave him a ship to finally sail home. After 10 years of war and 10 more of wandering, Odysseus reached Ithaca at last. But home was not the peaceful place he remembered. Believing him dead, over 100 suitors had gathered. They filled his halls, competing for his wife Penelope's hand. They drained his household's wealth, feasting endlessly at his expense. Every night, they ate his food and drank his wine. His own son, Telemachus, was nearly powerless to stop them. He was still young when his father left for war. Now grown, he searched abroad for any news of him. Penelope had used every trick she could to delay them. She famously wove a burial shroud, undoing it each night secretly. For 3 years, that trick kept the suitors waiting. Eventually, a servant betrayed her secret, and the ruse ended. Even now, she had not given up hope entirely. Odysseus did not storm back into his home as a king. Disguised as a beggar, he entered his own halls unrecognized. The goddess Athena had aged his appearance to hide him. Only his old, loyal dog recognized him immediately, then died. The dog had waited 20 years just for that moment. Slowly, carefully, he assessed the danger inside his own house. He watched the suitors mock and abuse him, staying silent. Penelope, testing suitors, proposed a contest to decide her husband. Whoever could string Odysseus's old bow would win her hand. One by one, the arrogant suitors tried and failed completely. None of them possessed the strength or skill required. Then the beggar stepped forward and asked to try himself. Mocked and dismissed, he was allowed to attempt it anyway. Odysseus strung the bow with practiced, terrifying ease. In that instant, his disguise fell away completely. What followed was swift, violent, and utterly merciless. Odysseus and his son turned the bow into a weapon. Locked doors sealed the suitors inside the great hall. One by one, the suitors who had invaded his home were killed. Servants who had betrayed the household met the same fate. The halls that once echoed with feasting fell silent and bloody. After 20 years away, Odysseus was finally truly home. Penelope, cautious even now, tested him one final time. 20 years of grief had made her wary of false hope. She asked about their marriage bed, built from a living tree. Only the real Odysseus would know that secret detail. He had built it himself around the trunk of an olive tree. Moving it would have been impossible without destroying it entirely. He answered correctly, and their reunion was finally complete. After everything, the war, the storms, the losses, they were together again. This story has survived for nearly 3,000 years now. Homer's original epic still shapes how we tell adventure stories. In 2017, classicist Emily Wilson Essendon released a landmark new translation. She was the first woman to translate the Odyssey into English. Her modern, vivid version reintroduced the epic to new readers. That same translation later shaped Christopher Nolan's own film adaptation. Its influence on his 2026 movie has renewed interest worldwide. Consider what actually happened across this entire story. 10 years of grinding war ended by a single trick. 10 more years of storms, monsters, and heartbreak that followed. A city burned in a single night of chaos. A king who nearly lost everything trying to get home. He lost every soldier who sailed with him from Troy. He returned not as a conquering hero, but as a stranger. Few stories in history have endured as long as this one. Nearly 3,000 years, and audiences still can't look away. Perhaps because it captures something painfully true. Winning the war is rarely the hardest part. Finding your way home again often costs even more.